Well, I just want to thank everybody for being here on our new little Monday afternoon tradition. Put a press conference today. Hope this works out well for you all. We're obviously very honored to be opening up the 150th college football season, a week ahead of everybody else. Not just the fact that it's Miami, but the fact that it's Miami and Florida, two of the big three schools in the state of Florida. When you think about the history of college football, the sport may not have been invented in this state, but it was certainly revolutionized in this state. I think you're talking about 11 national championships in less than the last 40 years. That's over a quarter by my math. And to have two of the marquee programs in this state open up the curtains on the 2019 season is a pretty cool thing that we're just excited to be a part of. Obviously in Florida, we've got an outstanding opponent. Just all the rankings that just came out, pretty much consensus top 10 team, and for good reason. I look at the way that they finished a year ago, and I really look at two programs in a way separated by 12 months. I look at Dan Mullen and his staff coming in and inheriting a 4-win team 2 years ago and changing the culture of that program. And I think of us both being 5-1 on the same weekend last October. And Florida's down 21-3 to Vanderbilt and finds a way to come back to win that game. And then that night we go play Virginia. And in a close game, we find a way to not win that game. And I thought the Florida win versus Vanderbilt a year ago, and then they came home a couple weeks later and were playing South Carolina under very similar circumstances, came back from a double-digit deficit. I thought that gave them the confidence where they played their best football in the final 4 games, where they won all 4 games by a truckload of points and finished the year with 10 wins and a top 10 ranking, where our season went the opposite direction, losing 4 out of our last 6 and sort of limping across the finish line. So our one of our main objectives this offseason has been to find that competitive spirit, that drive, that backbone that benefited Florida a year ago, and we know that they will provide that test because obviously I know Coach Mullen well. I know Nick Savage, our strength coach. I know how their teams will be conditioned, and I know the energy and the toughness that they will play with. Certainly, when you look at their personnel, you're probably talking about as good a skill as anybody we're going to see all season. Starting on the offense side, I think their backs, I don't know if we'll play a stable of running backs that will run as hard and try to run through tackles and contact like their backs will. They have I think their top 6 receivers are back from last season, so a bunch of guys that can make plays down the field, and then a quarterback in Felipe Franks who, the two things that jump off on film, number one is just his size, the way he can fall forward as a runner, which is a big deal on short yardage and goal line, but just his arm strength. I mean, he can zip throws across the field at a rate that really catches your attention defensively. Certainly they're young up front, no different than the way we are young up front. But when you have the skill and you've got a quarterback that's got some game experience, they can do some things to try to minimize that impact. Defensively, I think you'll see two teams that are somewhat structurally similar, at least philosophically similar. They create a lot of havoc with their front. They were outstanding in their pass defense a year ago, and a lot of that they rely on making the quarterback uncomfortable. They'll play an even and an odd front. Created a lot of turnovers a year ago. We know that turnovers in season openers are obviously paramount in any game they are, but in season openers, just because of the lack of usually live contact that both teams have had, just the idea of getting tackled and maintaining possession of the ball, especially at the quarterback position. Because those guys on both sides have not been getting a lot of contact, and there'll probably be some contact on quarterbacks for both sides on Saturday night. So they create a lot of turnovers, and obviously have an outstanding secondary led by their corners, who, again, will probably be as good as any corners we play against this year. The part of the game that nobody wants to talk about usually is special teams, which in my mind in opening games has much to say about who wins and loses as anything else. They return as good of a punter and kicker as anybody in the country, not just in terms of field goal accuracy, but kickoff and touchback percentage. A punter that can change the field. We saw how important a year ago field position was in terms of where we're starting. When you're playing against two very solid defensive units, it's not complicated. The closer you start towards the goal line, the more that helps, and that's going to come down to what? Special teams, turnovers, right? That's what the big change of field position tend to occur. So quite a challenge, but I think it's been on our mind all offseason. It's been a game that has been able to give us a focus in terms of every lifting session, every running session, and certainly throughout our training camp here in August. We got through our training camp well. We had our dress rehearsal scrimmage on Friday night at Hard Rock, which I thought procedurally went very well, getting us ready to go function in a game setting. And coming out of this past weekend, you got a feeling like, you just reach a point where sometimes you've practiced all you can practice. We have made great strides, certainly since the spring. We have obviously also made great strides since coming back on July 25th when we reported. But now we got to go play a game. Sometimes you just got to get in a game. You just got to go mix it up with somebody else, find out what you're all about, find out, who shines under the bright lights. It's going to be a very emotional setting. Both teams will be very highly energized. It's not a game where motivation will be the deciding factor. Inspiration will be there for everybody. It's going to be a matter of who can sustain their focus over 60 minutes and continue to compete at a very high level over the course of what should be an awesome night for college football. So with that, I'll open it up for anybody's questions.
Manny,
Okay, sorry.
Manny, how did Zion separate himself and win the job at left tackle?
Zion at left tackle, in a strange way, reminds me of the linebackers when they were here spring of their freshman year. First of all, Zion impressed in off-season program, in our match drill program. You're like, look at this guy. I mean, his athleticism is really off the charts. His body was changing. David Feely and his staff did an amazing job in terms of putting on weight, and Kyle Bellamy and nutrition. Butch Berry, just getting him, ready and versed in the offense. But it was one of those deals where you're like, well, he might be our best guy there. Let's put the freshman in. Let's kind of see what happens. And I remember saying the exact same thing with Shaq Quarterman and Mike Pickney and Zach McLeod in spring of 16. And what happened is he just maintained the job from there on out. He is a highly motivated young man. He's very mature beyond his years. And he does not look like a young guy out there. And now what helps, and again, very similar to like Pickney and Shaq, for example, what helps is he has above the charts athleticism. So, even if he makes a mistake, he's got the quickness to make up for it at some time. So again, he's a guy that, now, I also remember Pickney, Quarterman, and McLeod, their first month of their freshman year. They're a lot different today than they were then, but Zion has for sure earned our tackle spot.
Manny, I just saw the depth chart, and I'm wondering, I see Tate Martell or Nkosi.
Right.
At backup, can you talk about that position and how each of those guys are performing, and also, the Martell practicing a little at receiver? What's going on with that?
Yeah, right now, Tate and Nkosi are battling out to be our number 2 quarterback. And we just felt like after we got through last Friday that we had not, as we were really getting to the game plan stuff for the opener, to really see which of the 2 guys could really grasp that. So Tate is still, to that point, he may be our second quarterback, so it's hard to have him play another position when he may be our next guy in, God forbid if something were to happen to Jaron. So to me right now, that's really the battle that's going on.
And if you weren't, would that be a possibility? If Nkosi is eventually chosen as the backup, would it be a possibility that Tate could play receiver?
That would be up to Tate, but we're going to do whatever we can to get our best personnel on the field the best way to help us win a game.
Manny, up here.
Yes.
You talked about the tradition of this game of college football, and obviously you were a fan of the program long ago. Just curious, because I don't think you've ever been a coach in this series. What's your experience as a fan? Have you ever been to this rivalry game before, been in the stadium?
I think the only time I've been to a Miami-Florida game, I think, was a 31-4 game at the Orange Bowl. It was hard to find, right? They haven't been down here all that often, and I don't think the 2 schools played at all in the 90s. So, but yeah, I do remember that day. I do remember the 31-4 game. Not hard to get 4 sometimes, so that's kind of one that you tend to remember. But what I do remember is that when Miami and Florida State and Florida, when they played each other, normally whoever won that game, we used to say whoever won the state championship usually had the inside track for the national championship. And that's gone away for whatever reason, but there's no reason why that can't be the rule of law again. And I'm sure Dan Mullen and Willie Taggart, they all feel the same way, and I know we do here.
Manny, you talk about not only what it's going to feel like finally being a head coach in your first college football game, but also looking across the sideline, seeing Dan Mullen, a guy who you've shared a sideline with, and also if you could just touch on how much you respect him as a head coach, also him as a play caller.
Yeah, well, let's even start there. Just as a person, I've got a lot of respect for Dan Mullen. I think personally we get along very well. We consider him a friend. We've worked together twice, and in 2 of those years, Mississippi State had 2 of the best years in their history. I feel like we've always viewed the game similarly. He's kind of a very creative guy, a little bit of an outside-the-box type thinker, and we've tried to always be the same way defensively, and I think that's why we always got along well together. I know that his offense is very well thought out, and it's not just Dan at this point. His staff, a bunch of guys I know, like John Hevesy and Brian Johnson and Billy Gonzalez and Greg Knox, they've been together a long time. So you've heard me talk in the last 8 months about how important staff synergy is and chemistry and unity and all that type of stuff, and how the players respond to that. Well, he's got that on his offensive staff, and that's what we've been trying to build out here with our defensive staff. And there's some other guys on our defensive staff here that were at Mississippi State in 2015. So we know it's going to be a challenge. I don't think that there's any sort of advantage because we know him and he knows us and whatever. I think if anything, you just get on the grass, and it's going to come down to, all the standards of terms of, who can block and who can get off blocks and who can cover and, who can throw and catch.
Manny, how did the first time you went to Mississippi State, how did that come about? How did Dan get in touch with you? Or
we had played that year. Mississippi State in 2009 came to Middle Tennessee, and they had Anthony Dixon, who was an All-SEC running back, and we had a bunch of little feisty Blue Raiders that were trying to grab his heels and get him on the ground, and I think it was one of those days where what you want in this profession. You want your resume to be your tape. And you want your resume to be what actually what you put on the field, and not some making phone calls or running the hallways at the convention or whatever. So I think whatever it was that we put on tape that prior to scouting us, and then on that day gave him an idea that when he had a defensive coordinator spot open after the year that we got in contact that way.
I know this is your first game, but Miami's traditionally played Florida, Florida State, other big opponents to kick off a season.
Right.
What's the difference between playing a big game like this where the nation is watching versus, maybe a D2 school or whatever? Obviously a lot more pressure right off the bat, correct?
Well, where it's going to really factor in, again, and if you think about it on both sides, is the players with the least amount of experience. But this game goes even beyond that. It's not just a big game, which you see these cross-conference games. It is a rivalry game in a stadium where the fans are going to be split 50-50. And that's very unique. That's not going to occur, I don't think, any other weekend, week 1 or week 0, week 1 in college football. So everything that happens on Saturday, half the stadium's going to go crazy, if not the entire stadium will go crazy. So the emotions and the emotional swings in being able to manage that. So I don't think that you're going to prepare your team any differently if you're playing a quote-unquote lesser opponent, as you say. But the idea of getting a guy that maybe has very limited game experience to be able to handle the emotions, because when something good happens for either side, you're going to feel like you're on top of a mountain. And when something bad happens for either side, you're going to feel like you're in the lowest valley ever. So to be able to manage our emotions and to stay even-keeled and stay present, I think will be so crucial on Saturday.
So I see on the punt return, kick returners, you got Jeff Thomas, KJ Osborne, DJ Dallas.
Right.
3 really important guys on the offense. Is that kind of just a part of the mantra that special teams guys, like starters, are going to be playing special teams? And do you anticipate any other starters contributing heavily like that on special teams?
Oh, yeah. There will be starters all over our special teams unit. Special teams, and again, and I know Florida's program, I know they operate the same way because I've been with those coaches, and I already told you they do a great job in the kicking game, and we'll rest a guy on first down if we have to. There is a lot better chance to score on kickoff and punt return than there is a score on first down and 10. It's just the nature of the game. There's a lot of space. There's a lot of grass available. So to get the ball in a guy like, whether it's Jeff or KJ's or DJ's hand with all that grass, I know Dan Enos he'd love to scheme up play to have that grass and separation between him and the defense. So that's really what happens every time someone kicks a ball to us.
I want to ask about John Campbell and just what he showed during camp to earn the starting job at right tackle.
John is a guy that has just gotten better and better, and it was probably maybe the second week, maybe the second scrimmage, if I have it right, where he just, same thing, took a step up, and you always see, you're like, okay, work with that one unit, and there's a couple things that happen. Because number one, usually when you work with the ones, you're working with guys who know what they're doing a little bit more, so they can all communicate. So sometimes there's actually a kick-on effect from that. But secondly, you want to see if the guy can handle it, because you're also going against a one defense. Because we went ones versus ones up until Friday night. And John never looked out of place, and again, we've always thought that John's very talented. He just, again, We have a young offensive line. We have guys that we know are going to be really, really good, and John has earned the spot.
Manny, you were talking a minute ago about how half the stadium at least is going to go crazy after every good play or bad play and the emotional swings that can bring. You're a very emotional coach as well, which you were as a DC anyway. Do you anticipate having to temper that at all? Because kids follow your lead, and in a game like this, if the kids get emotions go too far, that could be 15 yards. Where's the line been in scrimmages about how much emotion you want kids really bringing to the field?
Well, I can't wait to see my emotion, because at the scrimmages, every time something good happens, something's bad happening for the other team. So I'm really excited that when something good happens for Miami, that I can really cheer, because every time I've been like, okay. So, no, I think we have discussed this as a coaching staff, the importance of our poise, because, both teams are really good. I mean, there's going to be some, give and take in this game, and in the most perfect laid plans, both sides are going to have good things happen. So they'll be watching us. They'll be watching us, because that's where they can, if they see that we've lost confidence in them, or that we're in a panic mode, then they'll certainly get in a panic mode. So I think that's something that's very important for not just me, but our entire staff, to keep our poise during the game.
Manny, what was your first impressions when you saw Lou Headley, and then what have you learned about him since?
I think I may have mentioned this, but when Lou came here on his official visit, I was in Philadelphia. So I never met him until he came here for good this summer. Now, we had spoken on the phone and that type of deal, but my impression since he has been here is he's an outstanding man. He's very bright. Wants to be a part of the team. Wants to be one of the guys. Has really fit in well with our other players. And forget about the fact he's from Australia. Forget about the tattoos, even just the age. I was at Florida State when we had Chris Wenke, who was 26, and it's just a little different. I think we had some GAs that he may be older than, but he's really fit in with the team really well. And then obviously, when his foot goes through the ball, it makes a unique sound. I mean, it's really impressive watching him kick the football. And when we talk about how important field position will be in this game, he can be really a valuable weapon for us. Could he play another position? He's going to play punter right now. And if we cover well, that'll be the only thing I'll do is kick it and then run off the field and high five the coaches.
Over here. Hey, Manny. So you have 9 upperclassmen starting on defense, 5 upperclassmen starting on offense. I don't think we ever asked you since you became head coach about roster balance and the position numbers at each position and the upperclassmen versus younger players of the position. Are you happy with the overall balance of your roster? How many years might it take for it to be exactly where you want in recruiting? Can you address that a little bit?
Yeah, generally in year one, your roster will be out of balance. And I bet if you asked Dan Mullen the question today, I bet he would say his roster's out of balance as well. There's attrition that happens with the new program. And then we're all in a little bit of a different era with the transfers, which, as we know, work in both directions. So, for lack of a better term, keeping the middle class of your football team around for the long haul is going to be a trick, right? Because the guys that are maybe not quite starters as they get into their second and third and fourth year in the program, they have a lot of incentive now to leave from outside influences. So, no, we're not where we need to be. That will be. When that'll occur, it's a little different now too, because can you fill in some blanks with some transfers? Can you get older, at some spots? But that's something that as the calendar year goes on and we get closer to signing day, that we can look. And they're also talking about maybe changing the rules on over signing, taking more than 25 in a class, which I think everyone in college football would be for.
Man, you have Sam Brooks, second string middle linebacker, played D-end in high school. How do you feel like he's transitioning to the new position?
Sam's done really well, and that's something that we've seen that before, because a lot of times, Sam was a terror at Miami Northwestern coming off the edge, but you have to be able to project, and that's something that goes back to the Jimmy Johnson and Schnellenberger days here, that you take guys and get them to different positions and getting your speed on defense. And Sam is a guy that we know can run. When he gets fully developed, it's going to be really, really impressive to see. But he's already made great gains since he's been here, and Sam's a very, very old soul type guy, very mature and very serious about his business, and came in this summer and really started to pick up the defense well.
Manny, I see Bubba Bolden is behind Curvin.
Right.
How how has he been doing? I wasn't sure if he was going to be able to play that first game. And then also the other question is, do you foresee anyone not traveling to Orlando for the game based on rules violations?
Number one, we expect to have everybody there on Saturday. Number two, Bubba has been drinking out of a fire hose a little bit since he came because it's new, but Bubba's very intelligent and he has experience. So you can kind of same as everything. Oh yeah, we used to call this, we used to call that. So he's picking it up, it's just now it's like that, when I start asking the questions really fast, you have it really fast. And Bubba's a great learner. Physically, he stands out on the field with his range and athleticism, and there's some things that have wowed everybody in the program since he's been at practice. And as that happens, I think his role will increase more and more as the year goes on.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.